everybody's focusing now, or lately has been, on how corporations are the worst and everything's fault of the corporations. But like in my analysis, as like I've also seen like a bunch of analysis from a bunch of people, then I try to find like a critical point of view on it. Corporations really a lot are just a product of sort of like a social pressure from either the countries, the governments, or various forces there, like intelligence agencies or whatever, overt or covert. And also a reflection of passive reflection of what people prefer. So when they are bad, they oftentimes are bad because they were sort of set up to be bad from the start. Because like if they have intentionally like have the rule, because they're following rules, like they are legally operating entities. So if the rules are set up so that like they have to maximize their profits no matter the cost is an imperative, that's obviously a bad setup for the whole enterprise, which if it was different and the company still was just trying to follow the law, it would be acting differently then. And if you have people, which is related to universal basic income, if people actually had more money to like from the state, from which instead of the state deciding to give the money to the companies, the people would have more money to therefore more decisively determine the course of what the companies would be doing, then the companies would just have to adapt and shift to that, and would have to like they are buckling, of course, to any kind of pressure. They're buckling to the gender equality pressure. They're buckling to environmental protection pressure. They definitely at least feel that they have to make a show of like being on the right side of things. Then like if they like fail to actually address the problems and be ecological, or actually like have a diverse work environment that's respectful, it's generally because, again, the problem starts with the whole setup and imperative of the company from the start, which is a law that can be changed. So right. So like from me, like corporations are more of a symptom, like the way they're behaving is more of a symptom of the state of humanity than that the corporation is as a leading force of anything.
I agree 100%. And I think the easiest way to fix that is to make sure that you have some kind of internalizing of all these externalized costs, and some kind of genuine progress indicator. Instead of a GDP, you've got some kind of way of calculating the good to society that this corporation is doing. You know, whether it's planting more trees, or, you know, not polluting as much as they might be, and they get some kind of points or, you know, value direct to, maybe even converted to monetary, saying you're doing this much worth of good for the environment, this much worth of good for society. And you have to track that. You have to internalize that cost for them to maximize it. In order for them to get better, it has to be measured.
Yeah, because like the problem is not that they wouldn't be able to maximize a thing that is good. The problem is that they're currently maximizing the wrong thing, because what they're good at definitely is maximizing. Like that's the argument for free market and companies and corporations, is that they're good maximizers of however you set them up, they will maximize that outcome. So just you have to set them up in a way that maximizes what you actually want.
Yeah, I believe firmly that capitalism can work very, very extremely well, and it has worked very well, as long as we make sure that we're calculating everything. We're not just ignoring the cost to society. So I think with the UBI, it's a very good opportunity to try to do that on a worldwide scale, try to track the costs of all of these different kinds of actions. And we're actually very, very good at scientifically understanding the costs of some of these things. Maybe not perfectly, but it's getting very close and very capable of understanding what is the cost of a carbon, what is the cost of nuclear waste, and all these things. And we can put even some kind of dollar value, even if it's not as much as it should be, just some kind of dollar value so it doesn't get forgotten. Maybe it's even start with 10% of what we think the actual cost is, and then just ratchet it up over time to give companies time to adjust.
That's one of the suggestions, was that it could be gradual. It doesn't have to be 100% immediately.
Yeah, and I think any kind of UBI, we're starting to see pilot projects around the world, you know, for UBI. They're coming out. The Basic Income Earth Network is always, every day, has some kind of news on UBI and how it's progressing. I sent you this book that they're working on.
Freedom Dividend.
The Freedom Dividend, yeah. So if you start to think of it as not a handout, it's just it's a dividend that everybody gets as being a part of the human commons, right? So we have all this resources in Earth. We've got water, we've got air, we've got soil, and everybody in the Earth has some claim, you know, to the commons, let's just say. And that, so if a company's using more than their fair share of the commons, they should be compensating everyone in the world for using more than their share.
It does happen in some areas. The native populations in some areas are compensated for somebody exploiting the natural resources in their region. Like I think in Alaska, in the United
Alaska's
States.
one of the best examples.
So
they have
it's definitely a thing that makes sense, because the class of arguments I still struggle. I sort of hate economy, because economy is a science, sort of in quotation marks, where many of the people are being intentionally misleading or intentionally obfuscate what they actually mean, and so the whole science of it is clouded in intentionally, oftentimes clouded in things that are supposed to lead people to misunderstand what's actually going on. And I sort of hate that with a passion. And so I'm still not 100% sure, like the people who would be arguing against something like, universal basic income, not 100% sure, like what are all of the actors' genuine positions and or genuine reasons why they're saying what they're saying in all cases. Because, of course, there's this whole sort of basic, stupid argument against universal basic income, where you try to marker people who would be getting the money as like useless eaters, like sort of a Nazi eugenic idea that they
parasites.
Parasite that they don't deserve it. And I think that's 100% disingenuous. Like this is or misguided fundamentally, because that's just being mean. That's not you're not right because you're mean. That's not how logic works. It would be another logical fallacy. If you get slightly more sophisticated, then is this whole like demand side versus supply side economics, like what it would do with the prices of things. Because like one of the ideas that, as far as I can understand it, is that if you give money, a bunch of money to people who now have more money, then companies will respond to it by raising the prices of things, so that in the end people will still be able to buy the same amount for the same amount of money, same amount of stuff, and so you'll be just inflating the currency that way. And I'm not 100% sure if that's exactly actually what would happen, because I've heard some analysis of who it is who actually decides what the prices are. And it's not automatically because people have more money. The whole issue of like deciding prices is maybe manipulative, in that the people who will be in charge of deciding pricing would actually be the bad guys in that situation. It wouldn't be that like they're doing just the fine thing that they were supposed to do the whole time and it's fine as they would like to present it. It's just like that's what they would be doing to ensure politically that what they hate will fail. I think could be the whole issue or problem with that situation. And that's not definitely how it is presented, because the people have sort of interest in presenting it in particular ways.
Yeah, the macroeconomics of it are definitely very complicated to the layman to even try to explain, inflation and how it might work. But I think the easier way is trying to imagine you're not just creating the money from nothing. You're going to get it from somebody's labor along the way. Money is just a representation of a labor or material that got pulled out of the earth. A tree that got cut down, it has value. A tree that's standing up doesn't have value, but it should. A tree that's standing up, that's taking carbon out of the air and giving us air to breathe, that air has value to all of us. So under the new GPI system, every single growing tree in the world, every single blade of grass essentially would have some value to the air that it's producing to us, right? So
I think actually what's the carbon tax, as far as I can tell, is pretty solid. That's the different issue. What I was talking about was more the universal basic income is more questionable than I think the carbon tax in general, how to implement, how it would work. With carbon tax, the main class of counter arguments that I've heard would be that if you just implement it globally flatly, then it would further disadvantage already disadvantaged third world countries.
Not if you had the global carbon tax converted into a global UBI. Just straight up. All the money you take from the carbon tax, you just give back to everybody equally. And that's probably the best way to do it, right? It takes away all that argument about how it's unfair, because it's 100% fair to every baby in the world has a certain amount of right to breathable air and drinkable water. And
I guess then
any company polluting that air,
then you've
moved
moved the concern to that you're not just ward of the state, but you're ward of the one world government type thing. And so the issue is in how you what do you mean by how distributes all that money?
Yeah. How do you keep it from getting corrupted and from people, stealing from that system? And that's where it's got to be fully transparent.
To enforce their own political ideas, meaning like making it in some ways conditional so that you are making sure that your political opponents, people you hate,
That's
won't get
that's
it.
that's the most important part of any UBI is there can't be any conditions whatsoever. It has to be unconditional. Otherwise, you're just opening yourself up for a whole can of worms everywhere, wherever you throw conditions on or you're allowed to throw conditions on. So if you just make it across the board, unconditional, worldwide carbon tax, flat rate, even if it's low to start with, and then 100% of that money just goes straight back into somebody's digital wallet. Everyone in the world can have a phone nowadays. Everyone in the world, no matter how poor you are, it's possible to have a digital wallet, online, and you access it and you pay with your phone or whatever. And they can use part of that funding to buy a phone if they have to. But everybody in the world could be tracked, and it could be very automated, very, very easily kind of enforced, as long as the world just agrees on it. I think that's the easiest place to start.
I just think that then, because then like the opposition comes from, because I'm just thinking now exclusively of counter arguments. Then the opposition comes from, okay, so it's like, it's not ideological directly in that any particular political actor would be able to deny the money to anybody. So, okay, that's, I guess, in some level it's fine or fair, definitely. But then the issue would be that they have to implement it, like you said, in a electronic way, in that like many freedom-minded anarchist and libertarian people who would really hate the idea that there would be some sort of like a universal global tracking of everybody's wallet electronically and all of the transactions, because it's convenient. That's what it is, convenient. But then you can't be doing anything with the money that can be construed by anybody as illegal or something a person shouldn't be doing. And then the question is like, so you want to break laws? And it's like, yeah, the problem is not all laws are just. And so if you have wiggle room, if you have some sort of margin where you can have some sort of you could have called it shady or some sort of like shadow economic or something. But if you have that margin, then it might be better for the civic society than eliminating it completely and everything being transparent, meaning that the people in like globally in charge of like all cops globally, like that's a term by Urza, the Czech anarchist libertarian. He calls it fizlokracie, which is essentially translated to like a copocracy, where that's a system that's great for cops. And cops, again, many, especially in the United States and many places, cops are not necessarily universally considered to be paragons of justice. So maybe we'll be giving power to them to harass people, is the argument.
It's a good argument, and the easy counter argument to that, of course, is that anyone can still use their own currencies. If they want to convert the worldwide currency into Bitcoin or into gold or into a wheat that they can use to trade for their illegal thing that they want to trade for, that will always be an option for people. Yes, we'd like it to be a little harder to do criminal activities with this money. We don't want to fund terrorism with it, for example. So we'll try to at least be somewhat transparent with the larger amounts of it, hopefully. And eventually, if you did have a good worldwide currency, it would be so efficient and so easy to transact with that it would kind of be the de facto standard for pretty much all big companies and all big transactions, just because it was simple and easy to use. You didn't have to pay a 1% fee to convert from one thing to another. So I think
now I think that makes sense if you could convert it to other currencies, and then it's up to various actors if they accept currencies or not. It's just all the governments obviously would accept that this issued currency.
Yeah, you'd have some kind of World Bank, whether it's the IMF or a UN bank of some kind, that would kind of be trying to track inflation as much as they could.
I have to stop you there. You keep mentioning IMF, and IMF is probably a terrible example of an organization because they're doing bad things precisely because they have this centralized authority over stuff. That's
agreed. But it doesn't mean it can't be done well. It's basically just an international monetary fund of some kind. It could theoretically be done well.
I would say, whereas I would tell you, yes, it means it can't be done well. Because the problem is it's a one centralized global organization. So the issue is maybe it should be some thought about decentralizing this kind of thing. Because the main fear of everybody on the sort of pro-freedom side is that it would be a lever used by some kind of one world government type entity. So you probably really don't want it to be a centralized global organization for it. You should try to figure out some way how to distribute it, like the tasks, at least regionally in the world or something.
That might be okay. But you definitely have to have some kind of worldwide agreement that we're all going to pay this carbon tax.
Yes,
It's
but
going to go into
it's a
this.
different
It's a difference between
fund.
if you had like a European Union versus European Federation. There's like a difference between it's effectively one entity for the whole thing, which is more like a unified state, like a federation type thing, or it can
Yeah.
be more of a like based on agreements and like treaties and stuff, but it could be a union type agreement, even freer, more like well, confederacy, but more free union even than is European Union is.
What if you called it like the World Public Bank? Every single member of the world is an owner of it and a shareholder in it. And it's up to all of us to kind of maybe vote in some way on how we do things, or get some kind of constitution on how that worldwide public bank is run.
Okay, it would matter a lot how the institution is structured. That like for sure. And if I say distributed, it means that its decision making has to be distributed. Meaning that if you made it like a direct online democracy, and it's for everybody in the world, so everybody in the world can vote in it. That becomes doable, or that becomes justifiable even for the part of the freedom-focused people who are Democrats. There's of course like anarchists don't have to be Democrats. They don't have to believe in even democracy as such. But most people would probably accept democracy as the least of all the evils. Like meaning like it's good enough. Like it doesn't. You understand that most people understand it's not the best system that could theoretically exist, but they would probably vastly prefer it from something like International Monetary Fund, which is very opaque in and undemocratic in even how the people would get in it. Like in European Union, one of the arguments against European Union would be a lot of the functions are not actually directly voted for, but are appointed. And that is like a big problem for a lot of the freedom-minded people, who many of whom do have fair arguments about various aspects of how it could be problematic. So you probably don't want a single centralized global organization with appointed leadership and closed doors decision making.
That makes sense to me. I like that. So if you think of it as a world democratic bank with a worldwide currency, it could be a new Bitcoin. But the problem with Bitcoin that I always hated the most was the fluctuations. You couldn't use it to buy a donut, right? So any kind of worldwide bank.
You can set up your new coin however you want technically. You can set up the rules of how the coin works, however you want.
Yeah. So I'd want to basically, bank it to a basket of goods. One world credit, one world public credit, WPC, whatever you want to call it, is able to buy, this much goods on average on a worldwide price. And you kind of maybe fluctuate that based on that value of a basket of goods to try to.
Sure, like there will be there will be fluctuations. Like all central banks have to do calculations and guess these things. Like there has to be adjustments and stuff. But you don't have to make it like a speculative currency.
Yeah,
which
it's not. Yeah,
would be like about like what's it called? To the moon things like
the moon. Yeah, I'm horribly against any of that kind of.
Stay on Earth. It's staying on Earth. It's not going to the moon.
Currency has a purpose. The purpose of currency is to transact and to have a store of value of your labor and your abilities. It's not to be speculative at all. And that's the major issue with any kind of cryptocurrency, is it's just completely been corrupted.
It's like, corrupted in a sense of like, it's just like calling it a currency is just misleading because it's a different kind of financial instrument than what you would normally call a currency. It's
the world's largest Ponzi scheme, essentially, is what it is.
Some of them. It's just like, because I can, full disclosure, I did invest a little bit, a little small amount of money into, do you know Cardano?
Cardano, no, I do not.
It has a shortcut ADA, ADA. ADA is after Ada Lovelace, the first person who wrote a computer program in like the 19th century. And Cardano actually, because it was a friend of mine who's like in the crypto stuff, because he was a professional poker player, so he understands perfectly well what like it's about. It's kind of gambling essentially, but even to gambling, of course, there is kind of science. So you can be, if you understand it, and you're just not just spending money willy-nilly, you can be informed gambler, is essentially what it is. So I asked him like, okay, so I have a small amount of money, because of course one of the rules is like you shouldn't get all your money into like a cryptocurrency. That's definitely not a good idea. But if you feel adventurous, you can have like a small part of your portfolio. Just why not just pick one and just like, who knows? It's a bet is what that is. So you have to understand it's a form of gambling. Which I normally don't do a lot, but he sort of convinced me by like, okay, so I asked him to pick one for me, pick one currency that, because there's a million of them, that like would make sense for me, because he knows me like from his opinion. And he was like, yeah, I found one. This is more like your style. And so he said, Cardano, just try Cardano. And the idea is Cardano is open source, and it's worked on by university, like people at universities all over the world. And it's a new idea how to technologically improve the blockchain technology. So it's supposed to have a practical purpose. So that's the reasonable thing why these currencies are supposed to exist, like that by like a reasonable, practically minded person who's just progressive would try to develop it as a new technology type thing. So again, checked all the boxes. Like I don't want like the to the moon, like the Ponzi scheme type ones. They are not tied to anything that can be quantifiably valuable, but are just hype. So there's no hype currency, which is why it's not like growing like crazy. It's just like slowly, steadily. Which is again like indicators probably a better idea to long term to invest in. So I did some money, and even like it grew later. So I did make some money actually on it because I bought it at like $2.1, and it then grew to $2.8. So it's conservative. It's not like the to the moon ones could jump like 30 times, but like this is just for me that's reasonable. So it was like fun, but I was like Cardano, that's familiar. Who's Cardano? Because again, Ada Lovelace is a person, and Cardano is Gerolamo Cardano. And do you know who was Gerolamo Cardano?
No.
An astrologer. Who?
Really? Yeah, that's why they chose that one for you.
No, he didn't know it. He didn't realize it at all. And at that point, I have already written about Cardano in my book. So it's just like, he was right. I was like, you were right. That's definitely my style. And Cardano, because he also was a mathematician. He was like one of the Renaissance people who invented everything in like 15 fields. So he invented a theory of games of chance, pretty much. So it's like a great mathematician from there. But it's like the coincidence of that, it's just like, just pick for me. It's like one of my style, and he's completely oblivious. Just picks one named after an astrologer.
If we were going to have some kind of worldwide cryptocurrency, and I've done a fair bit of research onto this, I've read a lot of Medium articles on it. It's been a bit of a passion for me for almost 10 years. I was really close to buying into Bitcoin on several occasions, but then I just kind of talked myself out of it every time and kind of shoot myself. But at the same time, it feels like almost dirty money. I feels like I'm kind of glad I didn't do it because it just feels dirty. I don't feel right about it. It's bad for the environment. There's all these other reasons why it's kind of bad. But if we were to get one that worked, I think all you really need is a system where basically if people are buying coins, you're creating coins to sell them, and you're keeping the money, whatever currency they gave you, you're keeping it there so that if they want to trade it back, you trade it back to them. So it kind of keeps it a stable way to transact money without it being speculative. It's still a store of value. You're storing whatever currency you want in the crypto world bank, and it's there, and they're going to keep it and maybe invest it somewhere, but it's going to be easy to convert back in if you want to pull it out, right? So that it keeps it stable.
I have to admit, this is like one of the sort of like a blind spots for my brain. Like there's not an area in which I'm an expert. I can learn about things like what people have said about it or what it is like. I can describe things, but I can't say if like it can be like how it would be how it would have to be set up. That's not within my expertise. I assume it must be possible because there are different cryptocurrencies that are behaving very differently. Like I said, Cardano is in no way behaving like the hype-based ones, which even they are different from specifically Bitcoin, because like, you have like Bitcoin, and what I have learned like just as like a observer of it from the outside who doesn't really understand it. You have like Bitcoin and you have Ethereum and something like Cardano, which is like more in the category of there is some connection to it being a technological innovation and it having a practical purpose. So part of why these are backed, like I think Ethereum, I probably is better now than Bitcoin in terms of some of the like rational aspects of it, like why we would want to have a currency. So like in the case of Cardano, you would see that Cardano isn't wildly fluctuating. Cardano isn't super quickly growing. It's just there's a completely specific expectation of how much it could grow to its maximum potential because they know what it's for. Then there is the idea of what is the sort of the outcome ideally that they might want to accomplish in terms of how many people decide to back it, because like the influx of money into like people like investing money into it is what's increasing the value of the
Yeah.
currency. So that's what like how you're backing the value of the currency type thing. And the problem with it, as far as I can understand it, is that if you're creating a new one, then it could take a while for it to settle. Meaning that like just based on the fact that there's an adoption of it, like meaning people are deciding to back it or use it, that is increasing the value of each coin. But then if you have a plan the whole time what it's supposed to be for and on what scale and stuff, then I
Yeah.
guess you could manage it's like the level of the value of the currency like a central bank with any currency does.
Exactly. It's changing it from, a supply and demand where you're limiting supply. So it's just like a stock. The demand goes up and the price goes up. You don't want to have a limited demand or a limited supply. You basically want to say, okay, you've got $1 of a euro or a US dollar. I'll take that and I'll give you $1 of our stable coin. Stablecoin was one that tried to do it. They pegged it to the US dollar, but the problem was they just spent that money. They didn't actually save it. They just went and blew it on more servers and more growth or whatever. And you were trying to invest in the company. So it wasn't stable anymore. And eventually it blew up because they realized, hey, people tried to pull their money out and there was no money there. So as long as you actually are taking that money and investing it in something valuable and keeping it so that you can pay it out when people want, you can basically take this stable coin and transact it with any other currency in the world, even Bitcoin, for example. But your price is always stable. You're not buying it on the speculation that it's going to go up. It will never go up. It will always be a stable. One stable coin is worth $1 US or one world currency unit, which buys you one basket of goods.
It's like all money is made up on some level, so you can make up the rules of the money to do what you want it to do. You just then have to not mismanage it.
Exactly. So I could see that working very well on a worldwide public bank level where it's easy to transact with. It's free. Transactions are, nearly free, maybe 0.001% or something.
Yeah, but I think that the movement in that direction is that like so far it's been like a niche thing or a thing done by individuals outside of normal financial systems. But I think that the governments and larger groups of people are like more traditionally serious institutions are considering creating their own. I think wasn't it China creating their own?
China's going to make their own public Bitcoin.
So if like a government does it, then the government should be probably as good with a coin of this type as it is with any currency that it issues.
I think there's definitely potential, and Facebook was going to do a one on the Libra coin, I think it was going to call, and they're trying to get 10,000 companies to sign on and say this is the new global currency. But it kind of got bat down by some of these, governments and freedom people that they were afraid of Facebook taking control of the world's currencies. But there's definitely potential there with a worldwide collaboration.
If it was like a United Nations level initiative, I think it could be tolerated by even the people who are generally opposed to like Facebook creating their own coin.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I would definitely be in support of some kind of stable United Nations public bank world currency that you could use to tax carbon from every country in the world and give back to every single person in the world as a UBI. And I think that could work very, very well.
I think the libertarians are hoping that one of the freely arising currencies will be able to emergently, spontaneously fulfill that function.
It's possible. It won't be Bitcoin, that's for sure. Just because the design of it is a very poor design.
Often it isn't the first one. Now actually the smarter money is on Ethereum or one of the next generation coins probably.
Yeah. It has to be stable. That's my main point for it to work as a worldwide currency. It cannot be speculative. Currency should not be speculative at all. It should be a stable. I trust my money's going to be worth something tomorrow. As soon as I'm worried that it'll go to nothing, it's no longer. It's an investment. It's not a currency.
Of course, some amount of variability would be acceptable. Of course, it's not between like a 30-fold increase versus reduced to zero.
Yeah.
That's not
exactly. You just want to feel like it's safe, right? It's got to be a safe store of your money, and you don't want to just be stressed out all the time that your money could go to nothing overnight. Like even gold to some extent has some.
Or we could switch to something like from Fallout, the bottle caps or something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a good place to I think wrap it up. But let's talk more about this next week. So let's just ponder what type of UBI might work. What are the rules we'd want to have around it? But I think that's a decent baseline that we at least got started, is some kind of global tax, whether it's carbon or something else, to some kind of global public fund that's not, totalitarian, not controlled by any one party, but
Or just not
transparent.
like not just anonymously appointed from like groups of rich people and making decisions behind closed doors.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that money trickles down to everybody in a fair, completely open way because everyone's entitled to a certain portion of the world's proceeds, the world's benefits, whether it's land value tax, natural resource tax, and pollution tax. All those things can kind of work together to provide for that the world dividend, or whatever you want to call it, the world, just like Alaska has with their oil dividend. So let's think about arguments for that specifically, and maybe think about how that could work, how we could start with that, and a good way. I'm going to start working on maybe a framework for that, and this is very much the second part of my book, Pillar 2, as far as trying to prevent enslavement and poverty through some kind of a worldwide basic income.
I just thought of an acronym, which is funny. If you said, like, of course, like there's a bit of a baggage to one world, but specifically one world government, but we could call it one world dividend, and then it's called ODE.
I like it. Owed, one world economic dividend would even have the in there or something. Owed, it's everything you're owed. I like that. That's a very good. We're going to be playing with lots of different what do you call them, abbreviations over the next few months. So that's a good one. I like that one a lot.